of that time and that city. So put off cutting your grass, your car, oil change, and gym appointments until Tuesday, and spend Monday morning, December the 2nd, here in this room. And I will save you a seat, I promise. Today, when I did the research, today was really kind of astounding. And as I roll out all the things that happened, I think you'll agree with me. In 1841, the first wagon train arrived in California after 5.5 months journey from Missouri. Takes me, 5 hours? So there you go. In 1845, the first national observed election day in the U.S., the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November. In 1846, an American inventor patented the artificial leg. In 1862, an American inventor, Richard Jordan Gatling, patented the Gatling machine gun. In 1873, dentist John Beers patented the gold crown. In 1879, James Ritty patented the first cash register to combat stealing by his bartenders in his saloon in Dayton, Ohio. In 1922, the entrance to King Tut's tomb was discovered in Egypt. In 1924, California legalized professional boxing. In 1939, the first air-conditioned car was exhibited by Packard. In 1966, flooding by the Arno River destroyed countless works of art in Florence and killed 113 people. In 1979, 500 Iranian students loyal to the Ayatollah Khomeini attacked the U.S. Embassy in Tehran, taking 90 hostages for 444 days. In 1983, a bomb was set off an Israeli headquarters in Tyrus, Lebanon, killing 60 people. In 1983, marked the fall of the Berlin Wall. In 1995, Yitzhak Rabin, Prime Minister of Israel, was assassinated by a right-wing Israeli minutes after Rabin had attended a peace rally. And in 2008, Barack Obama became the first African American to be elected President of the United States. In 2016, the Paris Agreement on climate change became effective. Now, birthdays today. On November 4th, humorist and actor Will Rogers, broadcast journalist Walter Cronkite, television actor Art Carney, actress Loretta Swift, First Lady Laura Bush, and comedian Kathy Griffin. And that's history today. And it's now my privilege to turn the mic over to our history group co-chair, Dr. Ovid Vitas, who will introduce today's speaker.
Well, good morning. Lynn Schiffhorst grew up in Manhattan and frequently visited the New York Public Library, to the point that they consider charging her library card due to the number of books she checked out. She attended Catholic schools for 16 years and later pursued graduate studies in English at New York University. After teaching in Catholic high schools and at Brooklyn College for 8 years, Lynn moved to Florida. There, she worked as a counselor for the state during the day and spent her evenings in a Winter Park coffee house where she immersed herself in European poetry and wrote her own. In 1987, she married Jerry Schiffhorst and began teaching part-time at the University of Central Florida while continuing her work mental health as a mental health counselor. Now, for 30 years, Lynn has lectured on literature, history, and the history working for the Elder Hostel program, now is known as Rhodes Scholars. So here we at the History Group at the University Club had been actually honored and delighted to attend Lynn's lectures in the past, which have included topics such as there were sonnets before there was Shakespeare, Florence Nightingale, the Presidents and the Roaring Twenties, Harding, Coolidge, and Hoover. Another one, Small Men in a Big Crisis, President Fillmore, Pierce, and Buchanan. And I think your last one was on Joseph Brodsky, from Soviet dissident to U.S. poet laureate. So today her presentation is titled When History Becomes Poetry. So on behalf of the History Group of the University Club, it's my great pleasure to present to you Lynn Schiffhorst. Lynn?
Don't walk quite as well as I used to, but I'm sure quite a number of you can identify with that with no trouble at all. Well, let me say congratulations on coming today. This isn't everybody's choice of a subject that they want to focus on, poetry of the Holocaust. And yet at the same time, I was thinking that I should open with a quotation from one of the poets. I'm talking about three today. Nelly Sachs, who is, I think, unquestionably the most famous, thanks to her Nobel Prize in 1966. But there's also Hilda Domin, another German woman who became an outstanding poet, very honored in her country, and Anna Swir, who is a Polish poet. But Hilda Domin said something at the end. She lived the longest. The two German women, Nelly and Hilda, were able to leave Germany before they were arrested by the Nazis. So they lived in exile during the war, but nevertheless, I mean, they were very well aware of what was going on, and they suffered in their own way as well. But Hilda Domin would say later on that every poem is a peal of bells. Every poem is a peal of bells. No matter how negative it is, or maddening it is, or depressing it is, it's really calling people's attention. And the whole purpose of calling people's attention is to point out a situation that has become unlivable and that needs everybody to pitch in and help. And she was, Hilda was an amazing person, but starting out with Nelly Sachs, we're really looking at the grimmest poetry from the Holocaust, because it reflects most accurately what went on. And Nelly herself was born in Germany, lived in a very prosperous family. Her father was a rubber manufacturer, so you know that he was not short of a few pennies. So they lived very well. But of course, that was not going to save them. Even though she was Jewish, she was raised very assimilated. I think, like a lot of people, she thought of herself as German more than Jewish, until the government taught her otherwise. And she also remembered that they never celebrated Jewish holidays. They were big on Christmas. So, so that the turnaround was probably quite a shock for her. But she achieved immortality, American immortality, 6 years ago in 2018, even though she'd been dead for almost 50 years by that point, because she became the subject of the Google Doodle. And if you know the Google Doodle, if you ever had to Google anything, you know that is not a small thing to be the subject there, because it was viewed by 5 billion people. So that tells you something. And probably most of those people had no idea who she was, simply in part because her work is so accurate about the destructiveness of the Holocaust. Nelly, who was aware, I think probably very early on, she was the oldest of the three poets. The other two were born in 1909. She was born in 1891. But she was very well aware of what the Nazis were about, and she began to be extremely nervous, shall we say, to the point of really having what was the equivalent of a nervous breakdown. But she was able to get out of Germany, which was extraordinarily lucky, but not entirely lucky. She had helpers. She had the kind of people that Hilda Domin was talking about when she said, a poem calls for helpers, and to make an unlivable situation better. She had a friend, a German friend, who sold all the furniture in her house in 1940 in order to get enough money to go to Sweden, and she did not speak a word of Swedish, to go to Sweden and beg Selma Lagerlöf, who was one of the leading Swedish writers, who herself had won the Nobel Prize much earlier, and with whom Nelly had been in correspondence with because she liked Selma's work very much. When she was young, she wrote to Selma and they had a correspondence going. And this same woman also managed to find a member of the Swedish royal family, and with no penny to her name, without speaking a word of Swedish, she was able to persuade the Swedish royal family to give Nelly and her mother a visa. Nelly and her mother got out of Nazi Germany on the last plane. The last plane out. Talk about right down to the minute. She would live in Stockholm the rest of her life. She had a great deal of difficulty with emotional stability because she had seen too much, reacted to so much. And in her later life, she would spend several years in a mental hospital and just trying to, to pull it all together. But the poems that she wrote, even sometimes in the hospital, the best known poems that she wrote were written and published in 1947. In other words, right after it all happened. And her most famous book is called Oh, the Chimneys. And I thought what I would do is read you some of her poems, and I'm going to read them twice. It's very hard to understand any poem, for the most part, once. Some of them you can. With Anna, the last poet, you can because she writes in a conversational style. You'll get it immediately. But that isn't generally the way things go. So this is the poems are short. They're only usually a page in length or shorter, but they say a great deal, and they say it in a way that sounds, I think, to most of us rather surrealistic. You say, what is that? What did that mean? And then you have to turn it over in your mind. But I'll read the first poem, Oh, the Chimneys, and tell you a little of what the imagery is about. Oh, the chimneys, on the ingeniously devised habitations of death, when Israel's body drifted as smoke through the air, when a star welcomed it, a chimney sweep star, a star that turned black. Or was it a ray of sun? Oh, the chimneys, freedom ways for Jeremiah and Job's dust. Who devised you and laid stone upon stone, the road for refugees of smoke? Oh, the habitations of death, invitingly appointed for the host who used to be a guest. Oh, you fingers, laying the threshold like a knife between life and death. Oh, you chimneys, you fingers, and Israel's body as smoke through the air. Now, the chimneys don't need any introduction. I know that you know that. But the host, who used to be a guest, is her way of referring to death. Death in the Jewish community, as in every community, comes and goes. But thanks to the Nazis, death was a permanent reality. It was something everybody faced. And the fingers, that's an unusual image, the fingers laying the threshold between life and death. And one commentator that I found yesterday said the fingers are the fingers of the SS guards. You to the left, you to the right. Life, death. So let me read it again. Oh, the chimneys on the ingeniously devised habitations of death, when Israel's body drifted as smoke through the air, when a star welcomed it, a chimney sweep of a star that turned black. Or was it a ray of sun? Maybe something optimistic. Oh, the chimneys, freedom ways for Jeremiah and Job's dust. Who devised you and laid stone upon stone the road for refugees of smoke? Oh, the habitations of death, invitingly appointed for the host who used to be a guest. Oh, you fingers laying the threshold like a knife between life and death. Oh, you chimneys, you fingers, and Israel's body as smoke through the air. Now, all the poems begin with oh. Oh, the night of the weeping children. Oh, the night of the children branded for death. Sleep may not enter here. Terrible nursemaids have taken the place of mothers, have tightened their muscles with the false death. Sew it onto the walls and into the beams. Everywhere it is hatched in the nests of horror. Panic, not mother's milk, is suckling those little ones. Yesterday, mother still drew sleep toward them like a white moon. There was the doll, whose cheeks had been unreddened by so many kisses, held in one arm, and the stuffed animal, brought to life by love, in the other arm. That was yesterday. Now blows the wind of dying. It blows the nightshirts over the hair that no one will ever comb again. Oh, the night of the weeping children. Oh, the night of the children branded for death. Sleep may not enter here. Terrible nursemaids have taken the place of mothers, have tightened their muscles with the false death, the death that didn't have to happen, that was imposed. Sew it onto the walls and into the beams. Everywhere it is hatched in the nests of horror. Panic, not mother's milk, is suckling those little ones. Yesterday, mother still drew sleep toward them like a white moon. There was the doll, whose cheeks had been unreddened by so many kisses, held so much in one arm, and the stuffed animal brought to life by love in the other arm. Now blows the wind of dying. It blows the nightshirts over the hair that no one will ever comb again. Chorus of the rescued. We the rescued, from whose hollow bones death had begun to whistle his flutes, and on whose sinews he had already stroked his bow. Our bodies continue to lament with their mutilated music. You know, we're alive, but we the rescued, the nooses wound for our necks still dangle before us in the blue air. Hourglasses still fill with our dripping blood. We, the rescued, the worms of fear still feed on us. Our constellation is buried in dust. We, the rescued, beg you, show us your sun, but gradually. Lead us from star to star, step by step. Be gentle when you teach us to live again, lest the song of a bird or a pail being lifted at the well make our pain badly sealed, birth forced again, and carry us away. We beg you, do not show us an angry dog, not yet. It could be that we will dissolve into dust before your eyes. But could I ask you for a little more water? I'm a heavy drinker. Yes.
What language was the...
I'm sorry, German. It was in German. She always wrote in German. She translated from the Swedish. Oh, die Schornsteiner? I'm trying to, if you know German, I'm trying to say it that way. But she never became really fluent or at home in Swedish, so it was German all the way. But she never visited Germany. I mean, she never stayed any length of time in Germany again. She did go back to receive awards. She went into the country, she went out of the country. That was it, she was done. And she said one time, just the first time she heard spoken German when she was back, it just induced such a paranoia in her. She was, just in bad shape. Very hard. The sleepwalker. The sleepwalker, circling upon his star, is awakened by the white feather of morning, just ordinary morning. The blood stain on it reminds him. Startled, he drops the moon. The snowberry breaks against the black agate of night, sullied with dream. There's no white on this earth that's spotless. The sleepwalker, circling upon his star, is awakened by the white feather of morning. The blood stain on it reminds him. Startled, he drops the moon. The snowberry breaks against the black agate of night, sullied with dream. No white on this earth is spotless. Then she has a poem about the refugees. Someone comes from afar, who moves like a dog or maybe a rat, and it is winter, so clothe him warmly. Or he may have fire beneath his feet. Perhaps he rode in on a meteor, so don't scold him if he burns holes in your carpet. A stranger always has his homeland in his arms, like an orphan, for which he may be seeking nothing but a grave. Now, the poems are considerable. There are a number of them. And they were translated into English in, wow, this is a good bartender here. We've got all lined up here. There are quite a number of poems in this collection. They were published she won the Nobel Prize in 1966, and these appeared the following year in English in 1967. On the internet, you can find a number of different translators, who work on her poems. But they do take a little study because, as I said, she's using imagery that sometimes is hard to comprehend, and you have to let it filter through into your spirit. Sometimes your mind has to take a back seat, and you have to ask yourself, what did it feel like? What does this feel like? Because she's talking about what it feels like, for the most part. She died in 1970. She knew when she was a good age for the time, 78, died of cancer, and her father had also died of cancer, so I don't know if there was any connection. But at any rate, she really is probably not as well known today, as she could be. Extremely well known in Germany and in Sweden, but things don't always cross the Atlantic very well. The second woman, Hilda Domin, has an very interesting background. She also born to a well-to-do family in Germany. Her father was an attorney in Cologne, but being younger than Nelly, she didn't have that much behind her when things began to get bad after the First World War. She went to school in Heidelberg to study law, realized that was not for her, studied sociology and philosophy and political science, met a man who would turn out to be not the world's greatest husband, but they were together for most of their time. And they decided in the mid-1930s that they would go to Italy, get out of Germany. And her parents left to go to England because her mother had sisters there. Her brother decided that New York was definitely the place to be, and he was out of there and in New York and set up his home there. But they decided to go to Italy, and Erwin Palm was his name, and she got her advanced degrees at universities in Florence and also in Rome. But the Nazi race laws of 1935 were imitated by Mussolini in 1938, and they realized that both Hilda and Erwin, they were not going to get Italian citizenship because of the way things were going. It was definitely time to get out. They did go to England for a while. They arrived just before the fall of France in 1940, and they decided, looking across the English Channel at the Nazi occupiers, that maybe they'd rather be further away. But they had waited too long to get into this country or Canada. They also wanted Mexico. They couldn't do it. They wanted Brazil. They couldn't do that. And the country that finally took them in was the Dominican Republic. And so they spent 11 or 12 years in the Dominican Republic. And they were glad to be there, but they were very well aware that the Dominican Republic was in some ways an awful situation. It was Rafael Trujillo's time to be dictator for 30 years. And just before they came, he had massacred tens of thousands of Haitians living in the Dominican Republic. And the real reason he took in people like Hilda and Irwin was that he wanted more white people. So she called him later on a terrible savior. It captures something, doesn't it? Yes, he did save them, but he was terrible. At any rate, of course, she learned Spanish. Her husband learned to adjust. He was very rigid. He was mean in some ways. I don't think you could call him anything else, but she loved him. I would say describe him as a kind of domestic Nazi. She would have done better being a refugee from him, but she did stay with him. She helped his work. He was an archaeologist. He specialized in architecture. He was wide-ranging views. They stayed there for a while. They traveled around. He got, after the war, he got a Guggenheim. They stayed in New York. At that point, she left him, went up to a small island off the coast of Maine for 6 months, said she spent the happiest months of her life in Maine, which tells you something. But when she came back, her mother died in 1951, and for her that was a terrible, terrible blow. Her mother was like her lifeline, really, and she said that gave me a birth as a poet. I don't know that I would have been otherwise, she said, but it was that or die. So, she became a poet and began writing a lot. Her husband, of course, did not appreciate that one bit. But her brother in New York was very helpful and sent, thoughtful and supportive comments. At any rate, she is the only poet of the diaspora, so does Jewish poet, who went back and lived in Germany in the last of her life. She lived a long time. She lived to be 97, God bless her, and she outlived him by almost 30 years, which was a great gift in its own way. And she really became, a friend of mine said, after my father's death, my mother was like a bird let out of a cage. And I think to a certain extent, he was pretty awful. But in writing, she writes differently, and she is very understandable. But I'm still going to read it twice because I think it's very hard in general to understand. One of her first poems is called How Little Use I Am. She captured a feeling there. How little use I am. I raise my finger and leave not the slightest mark in the air. Time blurs my face. It has already begun. Rain, like a housewife, washes the street clean of my footprints in the dust. I was here. I passed through without a trace. The elms at the roadside wave to me as I approach, green, blue, golden greetings, and forget me before I've gone by. I walk on, but leave, perhaps, the quiet sound of my voice, my laughter and my tears, and also the trees' evening greeting on a small piece of paper. And as I pass by, not intending anything in particular, I light one or another lamp in hearts along the way. How little use I am. I raise my finger and leave not the slightest mark in the air. Time blurs my face. It has already begun. Rain, like a housewife, washes the street clean of my footprints in the dust. I was here. I passed through without a trace. The elms at the roadside wave to me as I approach, green, blue, golden greetings, and forget me before I've gone by. I walk on, but leave, perhaps, the quiet sound of my voice, my laughter and my tears, and also the trees' evening greeting on a small piece of paper. And as I pass by, not intending anything in particular, I light one or another lamp in hearts along the way.
What language were these written?
These were in German also. Yes, all the poems I'm going to read to you from Hilda Domin were written in German. She did translate some of hers into Spanish because, of course, she knew Spanish very well from years of living in Spanish-speaking countries. Toward the end of her husband's life, he also took a position in Madrid, so they were there for a couple of years, too. I mean, she had a worldwide, view of the world, but, you're still a refugee. And you still, as Nelly Sachs said, you're carrying your homeland in your arms like an orphan. She went on to say that the German language was her homeland. That was all that was left. I mean, she left, I don't know how much she left, but I forgot to say that when Nelly and her mother left Germany in 1940, they had one suitcase between them. These are people who've been very wealthy, had a big house, lots of beautiful things, staff to wait on them, and when they left, they had one suitcase that they divided. She probably didn't have much more, I would think. This poem describes the refugee experience in a different way. I build myself a room in air, among the acrobats and birds. My bed on a trapeze of feeling, like a bird's nest in the wind on the outermost tip of a branch. I buy a blanket of softest wool, of tenderly shorn sheep that wander in moonlight like shimmering clouds on the solid earth. I close my eyes and huddle in the fleece of these trustworthy animals. I want to feel sand under my small hoofs and hear the click of the lock closing the stall door at evening. But I lie in feathers, rocked high in emptiness. My head spins, I can't sleep. My hand gropes for support and finds only a rose to lean on. Only a Rose to Lean On became the title of her first collection of poems. You don't have much when you're a refugee. I build myself a room in air among the acrobats and birds, my bed on a trapeze of feeling, like a bird's nest in the wind on the outermost tip of a branch. I buy a blanket of softest wool of tenderly shorn sheep that wander in moonlight like shimmering clouds on the solid earth. I close my eyes and huddle in the fleece of trustworthy animals, unlike people. I want to feel the sand under my small hoofs and hear the click of the lock closing the stall door at evening. She envies the animals who have a safe place to live. But I lie in feathers, rocked high in emptiness. My head spins, I can't sleep. My hand gropes for support and feels only a rose to lean on. She said one of the hardest things when she got to the Dominican Republic is that there were no rose bushes, no birch trees, nothing of what she was used to. Coconut palms, that's what she got. She was grateful, but she was very aware. And she wrote a little poem, very short poem, about the importance of remembering what's happened to you and being aware of it. Because she says, if you eat memory with the spoon of forgetting, it's an evil spoon you're eating with, a spoon that devours the food and the eater, until a bowl of shadows, it's all that's left for you in a shadow hand. You can block things out, but what do you have in the end? Nothing. It's called Dangerous Spoon. If you eat memory with a spoon of forgetting, it's an evil spoon you're eating with, a spoon that devours food and eater, until a bowl of shadows, it's all that's left for you in a shadow hand. I walk with my shadow, my only companion, alone with it, over grassless meadows. I, ever paler. It, ever longer. It leads me. I let myself be led. The bare birches along the way, their smooth white fingers, they know the destination better than I do. You're just floating as you go. I walk with my shadow, my only companion, alone with it, over grassless meadows. I, ever paler, it, ever longer. It leads me, and I let myself be led. The bare birches along the way, smooth white fingers, they know the destination better than I do. Trees know who they are and where they're going. We don't. When she went back to Cologne, she visited the house where she had grown up. And of course, it was divided into many smaller apartments, in the 1950s. And but the woman who lived in the main area where she lived let her in. And when she walked in, she saw the old fireplace, the very elegant fireplace, and she got down on her knees in front of the fireplace and cried. And the woman who lived there, who was a seamstress, looked at her, you're crying over the fireplace? And she said, the poem that she wrote was very simple about it. It's called Cologne. The drowned city. For me alone, drowned. I swim in these streets. Others walk. The old houses have big new doors of glass. The dead and I, we swim through the new doors of our old houses. The drowned city, for me alone drowned. I swim in these streets. I go in through memory, through the subconscious. Others walk. The old houses have big new doors of glass. The dead and I, we swim through the new doors of our old houses. One of the last poems that she wrote in her early collection is Promise to a Dove. The dove is a wooden dove. She found it in a thrift shop. And she always kept it in her house. I think it was above her bed. And she wrote this poem called Promise to a Dove. Dove, I was looking for a table when I found you. Dove, lying on your back, pink feet pressed to your white body, fallen out of the light in a jumble shop. Dove, when my house is burned, when I am cast out again, when I lose everything, I will take you with me, worm-eaten wooden dove, because of the gentle sweep of your one wing unbroken. The dove is saying there's always something left. Dove, I was looking for a table when I found you. Dove, lying on your back, pink feet pressed to your white body, fallen out of the light in a jumble shop. Dove, when my house is burned, when I am cast out again, when I lose everything, I will take you with me, worm-eaten wooden dove, because of the gentle sweep of your one wing unbroken. So she was much loved in Germany toward the end, and she knew a lot of the younger writers, and they had a great regard for her. So I think the very fact that maybe that she had to struggle so hard in her life, in contrast to Nelly had to struggle differently. She had to struggle within her own mind and what was going on. But Hilda always had to teach. She had to be around people. She had to interact constantly, and to a certain extent, even though it's tiring because she worked from dawn to dusk teaching German, both in the Dominican Republic and elsewhere, so they would have a few pennies, but it does something good for you. It strengthens something in you to be constantly talking with people and having a place in the world. Maybe that's what it is. Now, the last poet, Anna Swir, she actually has a much longer name. She has a wonderful Polish last name, but I'm sure that when she was about to be published in English, the publisher said, "You don't mind if we eliminate the last 17 letters of your name, do you?" So she's just called Anna Swir. Her real name is beyond my ability. If anyone here understands Polish, you can tell me afterwards how you pronounce her real name. But she put a collection of poems together, Talking to My Body, and she has just, a wonderful way of being very simple. Her life was different. She was not Jewish, which should have been some protection being in Poland during the war, but she was an active member of the resistance, so that was no protection at all. And in fact, when the members of the ghetto in Warsaw, planned an uprising in August and September of 1944. She was there, and she went through every day of the Warsaw uprising. And she went on to live for another 40 years. I don't know how she did it. But she had written poems before. She grew up in a contrast to Hilda and Nelly, in a very, very poor family. Her father was an artist whose work never sold. And she wrote some wonderful poems about her parents. They loved each other, and they loved her. She was their only child, and the three of them were solid, you know. So if we have time, I'll just read a few poems about her early life, because she did a wonderful job. But she also did a collection of poems about the Warsaw Uprising called Building the Barricade. And they're not poems in what you think of in the ordinary sense. They are like snapshots, verbal snapshots of what was going on. Let me read you something here. This first one is called Air Raid. Oh, I should have said she was a military nurse. She had no training, I would think, at all to be a nurse, but you know, you did whatever you could. And in this poem, she's called it Air Raid. They say aloud the litany for the dying in a Catholic hospital. Breaking off in mid-sentence, a bomber dives over the roof. It flew past. Boom! Death killed a different house, different people. They're breathing. Speech returns. It hit farther away, sir. Fortunately, ma'am. This poem is called The Messenger. Chased by bursts of machine gun fire, she runs, crawls, creeps under the bullets, under the bombs, carrying orders and reports. She's unlearned how to eat and sleep. Her body is only eyes. And she gives the name of the woman to whom the poem is dedicated. A shell blows up the door in a fur shop. A man jumps inside, grabs an armful of furs, struggles, runs to the gate. At the gate, another shell tears apart the man. Through the mountains of rubble, through the burning gates, across the pavement, riddled with bullets, they run, carrying human bodies on the stretcher. Sleepless eyes scan the barricades for those who died. Skinny fingers lift dying heads out of pools of blood. And when a shell hits them, dying, they will think in despair, who's going to carry the stretcher under fire? People can be unbelievably brave, and she was herself. She also wrote some poems about the soldiers, the Nazi soldiers. This one is called A German Soldier. Tonight, you cried in your sleep. You dreamed about your children in a distant city. You got up in the morning, put on a uniform, a helmet, a machine gun over your shoulder, and went out to throw in the fire, alive, the children of other parents. He must have been 6'5", that young beanpole, a cheerful laborer who fought in the hell at Zielna Street in the telephone company headquarters. When I was re-bandaging his torn-up leg, he winced and smiled. He said, "When the war ends, we'll go dancing, little miss. I'm buying." I've been waiting for him 30 years. He came in with a rifle to expel her from the house. The house is going to be burned down, and she's destined for the camp. He waited until she fastened the strap of her backpack. He looked at her, crying. He said, "Don't cry." He was a very young Nazi soldier. Now, one of her most famous poem, let me see if I can find it here. I think I can. Two of them, in fact, if I can get them. Juggling different books is a bit of a challenge. Okay. Here she is in a military hospital. By the stretcher, on the floor, I knelt close to him. I kissed his tunic. I was saying, "You are beautiful. You can give so much happiness. You don't know yourself how much happiness you can give. You will live, my beautiful, my brave boy." He smiled and he listened, his eyelids heavier and heavier. He didn't know that such words are said to a soldier only when he's dying. And then this one, the last one about the Warsaw Uprising. It's worth looking at if you're not familiar with that to understand how anybody could survive that situation. This poem is called "The Conversation Through the Door." At 5 a.m, I knock on his door. I say through the door, "In the hospital at Sliska Street, your son, the soldier, is dying." He half opens the door, does not remove the chain. Behind him, his wife is shaking. I say, "Your son is asking his mother to come." He says, "The mother won't come." Behind him, the wife is shaking. I say, "The doctor allowed us to give him wine." He says, "Please wait." He hands me a bottle through the door, locks the door, locks it with a second key. And behind the door, his wife begins to scream like a woman in labor. She delivered him into life, and now she's delivering him into death. And if you think that sounds mean, every street was on fire. That's really what that was. And that the very fact that she walked through the streets to get this message, I mean, as I said, I really don't know how people are that brave. But let me see what I wanted here. The poems that she wrote about her parents, some of them deal with the, let me see if I can find it here. Some of them deal with the First World War. And let me see here. They give a picture. Through the streets of Warsaw, they're hauling kitchens for the poor. The poor stand in lines. They warm themselves by bonfires which are lit for them in the streets of Warsaw. It is the First World War. Mother puts on a kerchief, covers her face, goes out into the street to stand in line for the soup of the poor. Mother's afraid that the janitor's wife will see her, because mother, after all, is the wife of an artist. You know, very proud. They were always having to leave where they lived because they couldn't pay the rent. I mean, it was pretty grim. This poem is called "Before Dawn." You have to line up for 20 pounds of coal before dawn. Mother stands on the frozen street, stomping, the holes in her wet shoes stuffed with paper. Mother is glad that I sleep in a warm bed. They took very good care of the little girl. When we walk in the street, Mother says to Father, "I'm dizzy from hunger, and the child is as pale as paper." "Buy each of us a bonbon," says Father. "I have no money," says Mother, but she buys each of us a bonbon. "Anyway, it gives you strength," says Mother. We smile, all three of us. We taste. 3 paradises melt in our mouths. Let me just do one more because I can tell we're down here at the end. I track Sherry's movements around, and I know when it's about time, for me to just stop here. Let's see, but there is one more that has to be done. Only after Mother's death did I learn with amazement we were not one person. And it's precisely then, more than any other time, we became one person. Her living death lived for long months in my living flesh. She was in me day and night. I felt her inside me like a child. Her death will be in me until the end. All 3 of these women were totally devoted to their mothers. Nelly and Hilda and Anna. And there's something very special about having, a very strong and loving connection to another person. So let me pause here and ask if you have any questions, or you take over, Sherry. Thank you.
I most certainly would not have been here to cut you short. This is just so I can keep tabs.
I know.
We have questions from the audience.
Or even any comments is fine. I should say that the last Anna Swir's poems, of course, were written in Polish. So, they're all translated now into English, but they were written in Polish.
As always.
I have a question about the translation here, and that's a general question, because some of these poems were written originally in German or Polish. How much is lost in translation, do you think? That's one question. And the second is, were most of these written in a consonant way? In other words, the rhyming and the problem with translation?
Thank you. Let me just, at this point, I need to sit down. Can you hear me with this? Let me move the chair, wiggle the chair in. I can't do that, but I'll manage. It depends on how good the translators are, how much is lost. These people have outstanding translators. There isn't very much that's lost. The rhythm, of course, sometimes is lost because you have to say things differently in English than you do in German or Polish. The grammar is not the same, the syntax isn't the same, but nothing rhymed. Everything was free verse in all of these. Thank you for saying that. I should have said that. All of it was.
As always, Lynn opens the door to information we need to know and are pleased to get.
I see Holly back there.
I want to bring to your attention the fact that Lynn is a very, very well-received poet in her own and has received a lot of awards for her skills and her gift.
Oh, thank you for reminding me. I would have walked out of here forgetting. I didn't know if any of you would like this, but in recent years I've been writing nature poems. Very different from what's in here. And they're set in Winter Park and Baldwin Park. So I put together a collection, not in that you can hold in the hand, but online. And if any of you would like them, there are a dozen poems. If any of you would like them, give me your email before you leave, and I'll send them to you. That would be a pleasure to do.